This video contains numerous spoilers for both Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I highly suggest if you haven't played these incredible games that you turn back now. If you don't care about spoilers or you've played the games already, I hope you enjoy the video. Proceed at your own risk. Xenoblade Chronicles is without a doubt my favorite game franchise of all time. There's just simply nothing else with the same scope, story, music, and gameplay that Xenoblade has. The success of this franchise was definitely not lightning in a bottle for Monolith Soft, because after the release of the first game they were able to grow the franchise even further with Xenoblade X and Xenoblade 2. I figured that with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 just on the horizon that I should make a video discussing this incredibly special franchise to me. While I was brainstorming ideas, I had the bright idea to make a video discussing the numerous religious and mythological themes scattered throughout the franchise. The predecessors to Xenoblade, Xenogears and Xenosaga, were not afraid to include these ideas in their stories. Xenosaga even featured Jesus Christ as a character in the game. Xenoblade is no different to these games and features many of the same kinds of concepts. This franchise has been no stranger to taking many religious themes and symbols and using them as inspiration for its story and characters. While there are many blatant references to various kinds of religion that the average player may notice, there are also many references that would go unnoticed by someone not intentionally looking for them. These games, especially Xenoblade 2, adapt many different concepts from Greek and Norse mythology, Gnosticism, and Catholicism. In this video, I'm going to be going over all of the references that I was able to find during my research. I'm also 100% sure that this isn't every single religious symbol in these games. There's probably tons more connections that no one has caught on to yet. Though I don't consider myself an expert on religion as a whole, I'll try to do my best to explain each reference to the best of my ability. And with that, let's get straight into all of these interesting connections. Xenoblade 2 specifically has a few allusions to Greek mythology. Obviously, a main aspect of Xenoblade 2's story are the legendary blades, the Aegises. The Aegis is actually a shield that was used by the Greek god Zeus. Believe it or not, this fact is actually more relevant to Xenoblade 1 than it is to Xenoblade 2. In Xenoblade 1, Reyn can equip a scrap driver that is known as the Aegis Garter. This is relevant because this weapon doubles as a shield, much like the Aegis from Greek mythology. Another interesting tidbit from Greek mythology in this series is Elysium. In Xenoblade 2, Elysium is the heavenly paradise that is located on the top of the world tree. In Greek mythology, Elysium serves a very similar purpose. Elysium is described to be an afterlife where heroes are granted immortality by the Greek gods. It's quite similar to the concept of heaven in Christianity. Speaking of the world tree, it is a reference to a piece of Norse mythology known as Yggdrasil. This connection is confirmed by the title of the world tree's theme. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is a sacred tree much like the world tree that is the center of creation. The 9 worlds are said to surround this sacred tree. This is an interesting comparison to draw because the Titans surround the world tree in Xenoblade 2. Both the world tree and Yggdrasil are both the centers of their respective worlds. While the first Xenoblade Chronicles doesn't have many references to Greek and Norse mythology, it has a plethora of allusions to Gnosticism. The 3 central figures in Gnosticism are the Demiurge, Sophia, and the Monad. The Demiurge is said to be the ruler of the material world. They believe that they are the most powerful god in existence despite being governed by a higher being that doesn't interfere. The Demiurge's origins are strikingly similar to Zanza's origins in Xenoblade Chronicles. Zanza was once a normal human who gained the power of a god. Once he became a god, he believed that all life forms below him were subject to his will. This is exactly what the Demiurge is described to be all about in Gnosticism. The other god opposite the Demiurge is Sophia. Sophia is a being that is more respectful and caring of humans. This is in spite of her being a higher being than them. Sophia is described to not act like she is all-powerful as the Demiurge does. This god greatly resembles Meyneth. Throughout the game, Meyneth is shown to be the complete opposite of Zanza. She is shown to be more willing to use her immense power for the good of humanity, and not for her own personal gain. Both Sophia and Meyneth recognize that they are not the most all-powerful beings in the grand scheme of things. The final figure in Gnosticism is the Monad. The Monad is the ultimate being having the most power out of the 3. The Monad is described to not be the direct creator of the world, but they are the most powerful being and oversee the entire universe. The Monad also does not interfere directly in the affairs of the world. Obviously, they share a very similar origin to Alvis from Xenoblade Chronicles. Alvis was the computer that was present when Zanza created the Xenoblade world when he was still immortal. From this point, Alvis acted sort of as a non-interfering supervisor to this new world. It is shown at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles that Alvis had an immense amount of power, much more than both Zanza and Mayneth. The name Monad is also very reminiscent of Monado. This furthers the connection between the Monad and Alvis because, just in case you forgot,
I am Monado.
Another interesting Gnostic allusion in Xenoblade is the origin of the name of Egil's Mechon. His Mechon's name is Yaldabaoth. In Gnosticism, Yaldabaoth is another name given to the Demiurge. This name makes sense for Egil because he acts as if he is the god of Mechonis throughout the story of the game despite the fact that he is a mere mortal. Xenoblade 2 takes heavy inspiration from Christianity instead of Gnosticism like Xenoblade 1 does. Most of the Christian references involve the Aegises. In the Xenoblade world, the Aegises are special blades that were born from the cores of the Trinity processor that was present on the first low-orbit station prior to Klaus's experiment. Right off the bat, an obvious connection between the Trinity processor and Christianity is the use of the word Trinity. The Holy Trinity is one of the central beliefs in Christianity. The Holy Trinity is comprised of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Trinity processor is composed of Pneuma, Logos, and Ontos. The names of the three Aegises also have heavy roots in Christianity. Pneuma, the true name of Pyra and Mithra, is directly named after the Greek word for breath. This word can also be translated as spirit or soul, referring to the Holy Spirit, the third member of the Holy Trinity. Another interesting tidbit about Pneuma is that the Greek phrase on her chest is actually a Bible verse from the book of Proverbs. This phrase is, "The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day." Logos, the true name of Malos, is the Greek word for logic or reason. In Christianity, Logos is a title given to Jesus Christ, the second member of the Holy Trinity. Logos also has a Bible verse from the book of Proverbs associated with him. This verse says, "Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs." The final member of the Trinity processor, Ontos, who may or may not be Alvis from Xenoblade 1, also has some Christian references associated with him. Ontos refers to the Greek word for being or one who is. This word is often associated with God the Father, the first member of the Holy Trinity. If Alvis is indeed Ontos, this parallel would make sense with how he is essentially the all-powerful god of the Xenoblade 1 world. Just like the other Aegises, Ontos also has a verse from the book of Proverbs associated with him. This verse is, "Blessed are those who find wisdom and those who gain understanding." Something else that is notable about the Aegises is that the name given to them in the Japanese release of the game translates to Heavenly Holy Grail. This name is obviously a reference to the Holy Grail, which is an important treasure in Arthurian literature. In Christian tradition, the Holy Grail is depicted as the chalice that contained Jesus' blood during the Last Supper. In many works of literature, the Holy Grail is typically something that is sought after and hunted for as it is a valuable treasure. This is also true with Pyra and Mithra during Xenoblade 2 because many different groups try to capture her because she's such a legendary and powerful blade. Another important symbol in Xenoblade 2 is the conduit. The presence of the conduit looms throughout the game. This symbol also serves as the unique shape of the Aegis's core crystals. Something that is quite easy to spot is that the conduit's appearance bears a striking resemblance to a cross. Considering the other Christian allusions involved with the architect and the Aegises, this does not seem like a coincidence. The many different titans in Arrest also bear some significant religious connections. The Japanese names of several of the titans are allusions to the 7 deadly sins. These are the different names of the titans in Japanese and what sin they correspond to. While I won't go over all of these in detail, I would like to cover a specific few. The Argentum Trade Guild's name refers to avarice, also known as the deadly sin of greed. This allusion makes sense considering the greed of those who inhabit the Trade Guild. Specifically, Chairman Bana falls into this description perfectly. Another titan that I wanted to touch upon is Torna. Torna's name represents the deadly sin of wrath. While this reference has to do with Torna as a nation instead of the terrorist organization Torna, it does fit incredibly well with the events of Xenoblade 2's story. The terrorist group Torna definitely embodies wrath during the story as they cause chaos throughout the game. This parallel is likely what the developers intended for this reference to wrath. The final titan I would like to discuss is Mor Ardain. The sin that Mor Ardain is linked to is pride. When examining the events of Xenoblade 2, this comparison makes complete sense. Throughout the game, it is seen that the people of Mor Ardain have intense feelings of nationalism. This makes even more sense when you consider that Morardain has essentially colonized Gormott for its resources. While it might be a stretch, it can be concluded that the sense of power over other nations that Morardain has comes from the pride of the citizens and those in charge. I thought that these three titans had the most interesting explanations for their connections to the deadly sins out of all the ones I brought up earlier. That's why I wanted to highlight them separately. And that there is a decent rundown on the many mythological and religious references present in these fantastic games. It's incredibly interesting to see how the developers over at Monolith Soft worked these mythological and religious themes into the story and world of Xenoblade. Adding these ideas into the already compelling world of Xenoblade just makes the experience more enticing for players. Linking the game world to something that players are familiar with from the real world has proven to be an effective strategy for the Xenoblade series. I only see this helping the franchise to grow even more in the future. While this most certainly isn't a comprehensive list of every single allusion present in these games, I hope that I was able to shed some light on some of the most interesting parallels that there are. With the next chapter of the Xenoblade franchise almost upon us, I'm sure that in the next few months this list of references will only continue to grow.